Ladies and gents, we're on the module A328. Block 4, How Our Empires Experience. Unit 20, Decolonisation in French Africa. Page 446. During the last week of our stay in luncheon, the Metropolitan Press reported in its mutual style on some disturbing developments in our country. Hordis had overrun Philip Ivel, today's Skidder, and the entire coast of the North Constantinous and committed abuses against European property and persons. In response, the colonial authorities had been obliged to restore order and arrest dangerous individuals already wanted by the police. From that point, I had one desire to return home to get the real story from my brother Kadar and his friends. When my father and I finally returned, the atmosphere in Bayala was heavy and tense, the native population more anxious and insular than ever. My uncles and brothers, especially Kadar, reported to us what had really happened on August the 20th at Skadar, a region that had already paid so dearly ever since the massacres of May the 8th. 1945, the population of the eastern Ures Mountains in eastern Algeria, and that the whole region had never felt any relief from harassment, repression, and pressure. Not to mention the immense misery in which they were trying to survive, especially after November 1954, since it was from there that the guerrilla army was launched. After the outbreak of the War of Liberation, the colonial authorities had unleashed their troops on the farmsteads and their inhabitants. Civilians were hit with fierce repression and unheard of massacres, especially during the Operation Violet and Operation Veronica. In January and February 1955, the colonial media machine worked non-stop for months, exalting its cleansing of outlaws and felagos. This last word coined from the Algerian Arabic word for explode. It was a real psychological blood going intended to reassure the Europeans of and terrorize the natives by wiping out any leanings of sympathy toward the Novembrites. After months of steamrolling of abuse of all sorts, of collective punishment and devastating napalm fires, our civilian population of the north, Constantinus, was concerned, overwhelmed and desperate. On August the 20th, they had risen up across all the towns and villages to put our old saying into practice. Better die fighting than to die for nothing. Armed with sticks, pitchforks, scythes, and knives, the poor mountain people attacked everything that in their eyes represented the rumours and their unjust power. They killed 120 people, including 70 Europeans and 50 assimilated Muslims, whom they considered traitors. The Europeans were shocked. Fear and suspicion were everywhere, and the local and metropolitan press spread word of the Felagos uh, atrocities. Of course, the colonial administration reaction was not long in coming. Governor Jacques Sestel ordered a repeat of massacres and collective abuses of May the 8th, 1945. The colonial army implemented the order, assisted by European civilian militaries thirsty for vengeance, with the mayor of the Philippeville, one Monsieur Benquet Crevax, at their head. Governor Sestel himself gave the orders to shoot the prisoners and bomb their farms and burn the land with napalm. Thousands of men were rounded up in Skikda Stadium and coldly gunned down. With a lump in his throat, Kadar recounted how the dead lay everywhere. So numerous they had to use a bulldozer to dig trenches to bury them. My face bathed in tears. I asked him the number. he replied, his eyes red with rage. The Sistel himself had cited 1,200 dead, but that the Kleb, Ben Kleb, dog's son of dogs, must have massacred no less than 1,500. 15,000. We had no way to certify the exact toll. When I left for luncheon, I left behind a playful, exuberant younger brother, full of silly ideas and always ready with a joke. But I returned to find that in those few weeks, Kedar had aged several years, filled to the brim with a pent up anger so strong that it darkened his gaze. My mother, aware of this worrying change in her son, wondered aloud why did these poor mountain people choose to head toward certain death anyway. At this, Kedar exploded, finally giving free rein to the rage of that inhabited him. But mother, don't you know what those mountain people, as you call them, have suffered every day since November the 1st, 1954? Just like all your brothers everywhere, and even here in our home. I'm sure you could never have stood even a hundredth of what a rumours inflicted on him. So yes, in the rumours want war, they will have it. That day I felt much closer to my Kadar, even if he had become more reserved, more secretive, and more mischievous than usual. Understand that my brother was completely committed to the fighters. I didn't need to ask him anything. I just understood. That was all. When in November 1954, my brothers and I returned to our schools in Algiers, we all noticed that the atmosphere was the same everywhere. The rupture between us and the Europeans, military or civilian, was consummate and irreversible. They were on one side and were on the other. Worse still, for us, it was now us or them. The events in the north, Constantinous, and the fierce repression that allowed had dug a fissure, now unbridgeable between the Romas and the Muslims. Distrust, fear, and insecurity were all around. In each, Mohammed and Fatima, the Europeans now saw a Felaga in the making. Sammy and I viewed any rapprochement with the Europeans only participation, even electoral, in the colonial system as a betrayal, pure and simple, far from intimidating us or tempering our enthusiasm. The climate of insecurity and widespread suspicion reaffirmed their conviction that a struggle to the death had been launched against the colonial system and pushed us more than ever to participate actively however we could. Back at university, I found the same excitement and the same impatience for battle, which is already leading us toward the inevitable confrontation with the uterus. Indeed, in December 1955, the Algiers section of the UGEMA had barely just released the list of its officers. Among them, two female students, Hafsa Biska as Secretary General and Salika Bekador as Treasurer. For the first time, when they confronted with the arrest of four of their members whom police suspected of belonging to our country's nascent independence movement, the Front de Liberation Nationale, Ammar Rashid, Mohammed Lunis, Mustafa Saber, and Ahmed Tauti. The UGEMA leaders immediately organised meetings and rallies at the university and the dormitories to denounce the arrests and define the actions to be taken to ensure the release of our brothers. Even high school students were not left out. Kedar, then in 11th grade at the high school in Ben Aknoun, often came to visit me on the residential campus, accompanied by his friends, including Milad Brahimi, who would go on to become a prominent lawyer and human rights champion, and bring me information and organising instructions. Delegations of university and high school students were sent, some to police stations, some to persecutors in Algeria and Tizi Ouzio, some to the colonial administrations, to locate our arrested brothers, protest their legal detainment, and demand their release. To show the protest movement's strength, demonstrate its broad representation, and affirm its members' determination, the UGEMA declared a general strike for January 20th, 1956. All the Muslim high school and university students participated in the strike. The mobilisation and solidarity were total. Our four arrested brothers received provisional releases, and we later learned that we went immediately into hiding in Damascus. That is to say, in the mountains and the bush outside our major cities, to join the armed struggle and avoid masquerade of a trial that certainly awaited them. We viewed this result as a victory, which further strengthened our fighting spirit and mobilisation. At the same time, in addition to the colonial regime, we were obliged to face the university's racist ultras. Besides fighting us, the ultras struggled with perhaps even more hatred against the progressive European students, associations among them communists and Pierre Shellit's leftist Catholics. Nor did the ultras spare anti-colonial students and teachers like Andre Mendozi. One day they decided to violently block Mendozi from reaching his classroom and teaching because they considered him a felliger. The UGEMA decided to break this siege. All the Muslim students mobilised, with the progressive European students alongside them, despite the massive presence of ultras. With their unspeakable methods, Mendozi managed to deliver his entire lecture surrounded by our activists for his protection. The clashes with the ultras continued, unabated, and with increasing violence. Then one day, the ultras launched a general strike to protest measures around by Sestel that they felt was too favourable to Muslims. Sestel and the entire French administration, aware of the widening gap between them and the Muslims and the dangers this could pose for survival of the colonial system, wanted to win over some of the natives, so they decided to open an accelerated training centre for administrative staff aimed at young Muslims who had never completed high school. Never mind that this represented just a drop in the ocean of illiteracy, unemployment, and absolute misery in which the overwhelming majority of our people lived. The ultras considered it too generous toward the Muslims. They called for a general strike against the plan and organised what they called a university blockade, a human chain to wall off the campus and prevent all access. In response, the UGEMA called on students to break the blockade. And the inevitable happened. We overlooked their cordon by force. Reaching the classroom, amid a confused melee of blows and insults in all directions, as usual, Samia and I used our big backpacks as shields, wrapped our heads with scarves and cushions to cushion any blow, and ploughed into the fray like bulls. My brother Kadar had already taught me all the best techniques for self-defense in breaking human chains, just in case. It was doubtlessly during one of these fights that some student had noticed Sammy and me. Several days after a clash with Utrus, at the end of the morning classes, a young man approached me and asked if I was Madame Marcel Drift, of medium height, thin and well groomed, with the complexion an ancient of a European. I figured him from a Spaniard. I immediately replied yes, and before I could even ask what he wanted of me, he introduced himself. I am Brialam, the brother of your friend, Salih Usedik. 22.5 May 1956 crisis. While the French may have won the Battle of Algiers, they were struggling to win the war. Violent clashes continued across Algeria and the cost of war spiraled. May 1958, the government in Paris collapsed and the new Prime Minister, Pierre Piflimin, made it known that he sought a negotiated solution. This infuriated the Pyrenees and French forces in Algeria. On the 13th of May, an estimated 1,000 Pied-Noirs gathered for a demonstration in Algiers, demanding that Algeria remain French. Military leaders such as General Massou and Commander-in-Chief General Salan declared the formation of a Committee of Public Safety in Algiers, which effectively seized power from the civilian authorities. On the 24th of May, Salan established a further Committee of Public Safety in Korsika, and the generals demanded that Piflimin stepped down and replaced by General Charlie de Gaulle. De Gaulle, who was a leader of Free France, had established Algiers as the French capital in 1943 to 44, was widely revered for his role in the Second World War. With France seemingly on the verge of a civil war, Piflimlin stepped down and, following a vote on a National Assembly, de Gaulle was named Prime Minister on the 1st of June. On the 4th of June, de Gaulle travelled to Algiers, where he was greeted by enthusiastic crowds of Pied-Noirs. In one of his most famous speeches, he declared, "Je vous ai compris." I have understood you. Precisely whom he had understood remained ambiguous. The Pied-Noirs believed de Gaulle had understood them and their desire for Algeria to remain French. Those who sympathised with the FLN could easily believe that de Gaulle had understood them and recognised that the legitimate cause self-determination. While de Gaulle's speech calmed the immediate crisis, the solution to the competing claims by the Pied-Noirs and the FLN remained as elusive as forever. Jackson, 2018. Upon his ascent to power in 1958, de Gaulle insisted on a new constitution with sweeping powers given to the executive, the President of the Republic at the expense of the legislature, the National Assembly. This was confirmed by referendum that September, marking the end of the Fourth Republic, 1946 to 1958, and the birth of the Fifth Republic, 1958, as such. The process of decolonisation in Algeria had profound effects on the political and constitutional arrangements in metropolitan France. The 1958 constitution also had far-reaching consequences not only for metropolitan France but for the wider French Empire. It replaced the French Union with a new formulation, the French Community. While the new arrangement made little difference to Algeria on the grounds that it was an integral part of France itself, they were intended to preserve the French Empire elsewhere in Africa. Despite the events of May 1958, French policy towards Algeria retained a high degree of continuity. As such, in Algeria and in the French West, as you'll see later, de Gaulle's role is considered to be less decisive than previously thought. The two-pronged approach, the use of sweeping military powers to try to quash the FLN and reforms to demonstrate that to Algerians that they would be better off under French rule, continued. In October 1958, de Gaulle announced a 5-year plan for modernisation, industrialisation and agricultural reform known as Constantine Plan, modelled on a successful 5-year plan for metropolitan France devised by Jean Monnet. The Constantine Plan ultimately aimed to modernise Algerian peasants and win their support for ongoing French rule. On the military side, the Chow Plan, named after General Charlie, was a brutal campaign launched in the early 1959 that included aerial bombardment with the use of napalm, hunting commandos. Along with massive population displacement, the Chow Plan was brutally effective. The number of FLN soldiers dropped from between 60,000 and 90,000 to just 8,000 by 1960. Despite the military success of the Charlie Plan, it also destroyed agriculture and livestock, leading to widespread hunger among Algerian civilians. It also prompted refugee crises with over 250,000 Algerians fleeing to neighbouring states, like the recruitment camps in Chali plan proved effectual in military terms while undermining French attempts at winning hearts and minds. Moreover, the increasing brutal control over Algerian territory had the effect of displacing FLN bases into neighbouring independent Tunisia and Morocco. While the French military erected electrified fences and laid mines along the border, they could not entirely prevent the FLN members from returning to Algerian territory. The endgame. By autumn of 1959, there remained no obvious political resolution to the Algerian War, September 16th that year. The gale stunned many by setting out a new option for the future of Algeria: self-determination. What would self-determination for Algeria mean in practice? When would this solution come into force? What are the shortcomings of the solution from the perspective of both the FLN and the Pied Noirs? Our recovery continues. Certainly, we must not boast. In the technical field, for example, we are not yet at the point of launching rockets into the moon. However, for 15 months, our business has progressed. Nationality unit is restored. The Republic has solid and stable institutions. The balance of finances and exchanges currency is firmly established. By this very fact, the condition of the French and, above all, that of industrial and agricultural workers escapes the drama of inflation and that of recession, on the basis thus fixed and in proportion to the new expansion. We can build social progress and organise the cooperation of the various categories on which the economy depends. Pursue the essential task of training our youth, develop our means of scientific and technical research. On the other hand, the community is founded between France, 11 African states, and the Malagasy Republic, finally in the midst of our world, where it is a matter of both safeguarding freedom and maintaining peace. Our voice is heard. However, before France, a difficult and bloody problem remains posed. That of Algeria, we have to solve it. We will certainly not do this by throwing in each other's faces the sterile and simplistic slogans of these or of those who are obsessed in opposite directions by their interests, their passions, their chimeras. We will do it like a great nation and be the only worthwhile way. I mean by the free choice that the Algerians themselves will want to make of their future. To tell the truth, much has already been done to prepare for this outcome. By pacification, first, because nothing can be settled as long as we shoot and laughter. In respect, I'm not saying that we are at the end of it, but I say that we are in no comparison between what was 2 or 3 years ago. The security of people and property and what that it is today. Our army carried out its mission courageously and skillfully, fighting the adversary and maintaining wide and deep contact with the population that had never been made. Whatever our soldiers, in particular, 120,000 who are Muslims, gave in to their city, or whether the Algerians' masses turned against France, then it was a disaster. But as this has not happened, the success of public order, although not yet imminent, is now clearly in sight.